think I had a 50-50, but it didn't count.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, he's in the background. I'm short at still.
Hello.
How are you? How are you? Hanging in there. Let's go.
Ready?
Going to call this August 3rd meeting of the Hoover City Council to order, and that's clerk, please call the roll.
Council President Smith,
Here.
Council Pro Tem Green,
Here.
Councilmember Lyda,
Here.
Councilmember Middlebrooks,
Here.
Councilmember Murphy,
Here.
Councilmember Posey,
Here.
Councilmember Shaw.
Everyone is here. I want to make two observations. We have Mr. Joe Reeves, former city councilman for here in Hoover, and Representative David Wheeler. I believe we'll be hearing more from him in the reports section. Madam Clerk, if you please handle the invocation, and Mr. Posey the pledge. If everyone please stand.
Dear Heavenly Father, let us pray for our neighbors that we may love them as ourselves. May we have understanding, compassion, and kindness toward all. May we lead by example and represent goodness. May we not cast blame on others, but realize that through friendliness, love, and peace, the world can be changed. May protection and tranquility be over our city, citizens, businesses, employees, and visitors. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, amen.
And pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair is open for a motion on the minutes.
Move for approval of that reading? Second.
Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed nay. The ayes have it. Item 6. Mr. Mayor, I know you have a report on the census, but we have Representative David Wheeler here as well that would like to make a presentation.
We appreciate Mr. Wheeler as a state legislator. He represents our area and thinks about us often. And tonight, I think that you are thinking about us in a monetary way, and we appreciate that. So please share with the audience.
From the Jackson County Community Service Grants, I have a check for $10,000 to be designated for COVID-19 expenses, specifically for police and fire. So Chief Burgess and Chief Bentley, I hope you can put this to good use.
Oh, there he is. Mayor, do you have your census report or, oh, Ms. Posey gonna make it. Okay, thank you.
And forgive me, gentlemen, is it okay if we remove our mask as we speak? Has that been okay protocol?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening to all of you, and excited to be here tonight to give you an update on our census for the city of Hoover. I'm going to go back to a little bit of my foundation in terms of being a teacher, just to kind of do a little bit of history to remind all of us of what the census is about, why it's important, and then we will go to what we specifically here in Hoover have done to get good participation, and then where we stand today as of our numbers. First of all, I want to let you know that we have a special guest with us this evening. Mr. Carlos Torres is over there in the corner. He is a representative of the Census Bureau, and he will be here at the end to answer any questions that you all might have that I do not have information to provide. First of all, we're going to start with a basic slide, and I'm going to try to do this hopefully correctly. Right now? Okay. Basic question, what is the census? The U.S. Constitution and decennial census, as you see there from the slide, is a count of the U.S. population conducted, of course, every 10 years. This has been since 1790, and it's actually required by the U.S. Constitution in Article 1, Section 2. The census determines several things, including, of course, congressional representation, also used for state and local redistricting. And a lot of folks don't know it, but the census is actually the nation's largest peacetime mobilization, which is pretty cool. It helps to direct more than $675 billion annually in federal funding. And so that, of course, is part of that is money that we get here in the city of Hoover. Census data and our economic developer, Greg Knighton, can talk about this extensively, is used by businesses, of course, governments, civic organizations to inform decision-making. And we stress that information that is given by respondents is strictly confidential by law. The goal, and this is important, the goal of the census is to count everyone one time, only one time, and in the right place. And that's important because a lot of times folks, especially, for example, parents who have students away at college, they may say, well, they're my child, I raised them, so I'm going to count them in the census. But the reality is, where was that person on April 1st, which was Census Day? So who is living in your household at this time, not who may have been raised there or reared there. So for example, if a grandmother has grandchildren staying with her for just a limited amount of time, if they are in the household on April 1st, they are counted as being in that location. So they're counted only once in the right location, and that's important. Complete count committees. So complete count committees are something that the U.S. Census Bureau has outlined for different communities, different cities, different states, different community organizations, as you see there. They are a core strategic element of the census, and really their goal is to be the trusted voices of your community. And the goal is for them to create campaigns that raise awareness of the census and ultimately drive people to participate and get their census completed. A lot of times what you want your CCC to look like is members from the government, from the media, workforce development, business, education, community organizations, faith-based communities, other organizations based on need. So again, this is leveraging the trusted voices in your community. Who does the community look to in terms of organizations or people that they trust? Because they come together, they come up with campaigns and plans, and they go out and get the word out and say, this is why it's important for you to participate in the census. This is a picture of some of our Hoover CCC members. This is certainly not all of them. We have about 35 members total, but this was just from one day that we had a meeting afterwards and we said, hey, let's get together to take a picture for our group. So again, a diverse representation, which is great to see in terms of age, in terms of race and nationality, in terms of backgrounds, professions. It's really, I feel like, a diverse representation of the community. As I mentioned, 35 members. We have schools and school-related organizations represented. We have libraries. We have media representation, community groups like Hoover Helps and the Green Valley Food Bank, civic groups like the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Hoover Service Club, cultural groups such as the Hispanic Interest Coalition of Alabama, HICA, which is very important, business groups, recreational facilities, and of course, representatives from the city of Hoover and more that are a part of the Hoover Complete Count Committee, or CCC. In terms of action items, one of the first things that we did as we came together as a CCC, there was already a logo for, of course, the U.S. Census Bureau and even the state of Alabama, but we said, hey, we want to create our own logo here in Hoover. We want to be unique. So we came up with not only a logo, but also a slogan that you see there in the corner, Easy, Safe, You, Hoover Count 2020 Census. And we felt like the words easy, safe, you, that they hit home, they're simple, but they also drive home some important key messaging that we'll talk about shortly. You see there at the bottom, it says coming April 20th. This was obviously before the census came out. But once the census came out, we also had signs that took away that date so that it would still be legitimate past the April 1st date. And if you have any questions as I go along, please feel free to stop me or we can do those at the end. So a few of the action items that we as the CCC have done. We created a Facebook page, Hoover Counts 2020, and of course post there periodically. We created yard signs that had our logo that you just saw there. We placed those, and again, as the CCC members came together and had their different representations, schools said, this is what we can do. Library said, this is what we can do. So the schools were really great in terms of stepping up and saying, hey, we can place some of these signs at our carpool location. So when parents come to drop off and pick up children, they'll see that Census 2020 sign, kind of jog their memory. Several of our CCC members put these signs up in their own neighborhoods, and then you may have seen them across key intersections throughout the city. We really felt it was important not to just put up signs, but to put them up in high traffic areas. So we got with our city engineers and said, where are those areas? They shared that with us, and we were strategic in that placement. We also created magnets, felt that this was just kind of an easy way, something that folks could place on the refrigerator, see it, a quick reminder, both in English and Spanish. Actually went to some local businesses, handed those out, especially businesses that are in hard to count areas. And we'll talk a little bit about what those are a little bit later. But we also have them placed inside of bags of groceries that several churches are giving away in terms of to those who are in need in our community. We place them in different city facilities, library, the front office of City Hall. When you come to the window, you'll see them there. And then some of our CCC members said, hey, let me take a pack. And they placed them in different places, such as their churches, key areas where they knew that folks would see them and pick one up. We also posted messages, individual members on our social media pages are saying, hey, please participate. Don't forget to participate. One thing that we also did, one of our CCC members, she is the publisher for a local magazine. So every month, I believe since around November, she's put in just a little article about the census on different topics, why it's important. Also, I know myself and others have given speeches when we could to local organizations just about the importance of the census and how they could help encourage participation. Mayor Mercado has dedicated several of his monthly articles and one of his weekly videos to this topic. And also we've spoken with other advocacy groups about partnering with them in different ways to get the word out. So really a myriad of ways that we have tried to get the word out about the census and its importance. So this is the results, because of course that's the big question is, what are Hoover's results? It's important to keep in mind that the census is counted by tracts, and those are small clusters throughout the city that are how the census results are tallied. So looking at today's results, you can see there that across the nation, about 63% of the nation has responded to the census overall. In Alabama, about 61% of the population has responded and filled out that form and turned it in. Hoover at this point, and I just got the specific numbers from Carlos a moment ago, we stand today at 74.7% in terms of our response rate to the census. That compares with an overall count of 78% in the 2010 census. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that at this point, it's only self-response. We have not had that door-to-door knock that so many people are familiar with. So of course, once that happens, we expect those numbers to go up even greater and certainly surpass that 78% number. But I think that Carlos can speak to the fact that 75% response rate is certainly nothing to sneeze at. We are proud of that, but we know that we can do better. We are believing, of course, for a 100% response rate. That is what we certainly want. So I talked a little bit about tracts and how the numbers are tallied and are gathered, and how we come to how do you know who's participating and who's not. Hoover has about 30 tracts, and the majority of our tracts have a response rate of anywhere from the high 60s to the mid 80s. We have one tract that is not there. This is the tract that you're looking at, and Carlos just told me that as of today, the response rate in that tract is right at 39.3%. So when you hear that compared to how other parts of the city are doing, that is certainly much lower. In 2010, at the end of the census, this particular tract was at 44.9%. So standing at 39.3% today, we are certainly below where we were 10 years ago, and we just cannot have that happen. So you can see here that it's outlined a little bit, just to give you specifics. This area is between Highway 31 and Highway 65, or Interstate 65, that's running east to west, and then from Old Rocky Ridge Road to the county line separating Jefferson and Shelby County from your north and south. So this is, of course, an important area that we have already, as a CCC, been focused on and will continue to focus on. So the question might be, well, why is this area so hard to focus on? Why is it that the numbers just aren't where they are? I talked a little bit about the hard to count populations. And it's important to understand that that is a wide range of folks included in that category. For example, children 5 years and under. We understand that in the 2010 census, that children were undercounted by about 1 million, just because folks did not, for whatever reason, include them in their census data. So children 5 years and under, veterans, folks with disabilities, the homeless, rural Americans, low income and underserved, senior citizens, migrant farm workers, foreign-born immigrants, persons with limited English proficiency, and renters. So when we think back to that particular track that I showed you just a moment ago, and this was one thing that Carlos pointed out to me, because when I spoke with him, I said, well, what is it about this particular area? He said, well, if you look at your numbers, you see that you have a high Latino community members. And of course, the thoughts is, wow, we really don't want to discriminate. We certainly don't want to be, down on anyone. But he said, here's the deal. The facts are what they are. A lot of times, members of our Latino community are afraid to participate in the census. We all are aware of some of the rhetoric and some of the dialogue and some of the confusion and the frustration that's going on a national scale regarding the Latino population. A lot of fears, a lot of mistrust on the national level, and that trickles down to the local level as well. So Carlos said, you know what, the reality is you just got to get out there. You've got to get, again, those trusted voices in the community to speak with them about the importance of it. It's not about deportation. It's not about documentation. It's about counting numbers so that you can get the federal dollars that you need so you can have the representation in Congress that is important. So one slide that appears that I skipped here, and so I want to talk about that a little bit, is the key messaging. And it's important to understand that what a key message that may resonate in one community may not in another. For example, one of the key messages that we've heard from the beginning of this, we started as a CCC meeting in July, and one of the key messages was that if Alabama does not do well in the census this year, we are poised to lose one of our congressional seats. If you speak to someone in the Latino population and say to them, we're poised to lose one of our congressional seats, that may not mean much to them. But if you speak to someone in another part of the area, that may be, oh, okay. But then if you say to someone maybe in the Latino population, it could mean less federal dollars in our schools, that might resonate more soundly. So it's a matter of knowing your community, knowing who is where, and what message is important to them. All of them are important. Dollars from the census go toward road work, they go toward Medicaid, they go toward substance abuse treatment, they go toward a myriad of things. And all of those are important. But the thing is making sure that everyone understands everybody needs to be counted. And when someone says, why is it important, understanding this is why it may be important to you. So when we talk about what is the solution to raising our numbers, because again, our goal is 100% participation. We are certainly not satisfied with 75%. One thing that will help is starting August 11th, so just a few days from now, it will be that familiar knock on your door. Anyone who has not completed their census at that point can expect to receive a knock on the door. Now, the good thing about the census this year is you can not only fill it out by mailing it in, you can not only fill it out by phone call, you can do it online. And this is the first time that's been able to be done. If any of you all, and I'm sure several of you all have completed it, if not all of you, probably would say it didn't take me too long to fill out. We're saying about an average of 6 to 10 minutes. Pull out your phone, do it quick and easy, and it's done with. But a lot of times folks say, well, I'll do it later. And the key that we try to stress is no, do it now, get it done. And if not, August 11th and beyond, you can expect a knock on your door because the effort is to get everyone counted. In terms of raising some of those numbers in our hard to count areas, Carlos shared with us participating with key groups, for example, HICA, the Hispanic Interest Coalition of Alabama. We have a HICA member on our CCC. I reached out to her and asked if she would come tonight. She is actually quite ill and says she could not make it, but we are in conversation with them and will continue to be in conversation with them. Also, just in talking with Carlos, he mentioned trying to partner with St. Peter the Apostle Catholic Church and Prince of Peace Catholic Church that they might have, that they specifically have ministries dealing specifically with the Hispanic community. I will tell you that in the very beginning, we tried our best to get several of these churches on board, and they just were not interested in participating. He believes that now that we're a little further along, that there's been a message of, yes, this is important, and it's trickled down, that might be a little bit easier to do now. So we will certainly be reaching out to them again. Former members of La Casita, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it was a community organization that used to be here in the city of Hoover, not here anymore, but still has community members and ties here. And so Carlos said, reach out to maybe some of the folks who used to be here, see what they would suggest. And then I've also got some contacts with Hispanic media groups that we've been working with as well. Of course, we're going to continue our social media efforts, getting the word out through social media platforms, various ways to do that. But also one thing I wanted to say tonight is that we certainly want to partner with you all just as our council members and asking for your help and your support of that. I know that several of you are running for office again, and so that means meeting with constituents, meeting with voters. And so what I wanted to do tonight is give you a little present that you can take out and share with your folks as you meet with them. And that's just a packet of those magnets that I spoke of to share with them. I apologize. I have 5 that are in English. The rest we're giving out, we have a couple of that are in Spanish. But I ask that you please take them and utilize them as best you can. So again, I guess if in summary, if I had something to say, we are doing well in the city of Hoover when it comes to the census, but we need to do better, and we can do better, and we will do better. And we're excited about the challenge that lays ahead. And so with that, I will close it. If anyone has any questions for myself or for Mr. Torres, we are certainly here to answer those.
Ms. Posey, when is the program for the census? When does it end? The end of the calendar year, in the fall?
I'm going to have Carlos come forward and speak to that as I get the magnets and hand those out.
And while he's walking up, do I see some new jewelry on that left hand?
You do.
What's the date?
No date yet. We're
No
riding the
date.
wave.
She's
We're enjoying-
engaged.
I'm engaged. God is awesome.
Good evening to everybody. My name is Carlos Torres, and like Melanie said, I work with the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm a partnership specialist, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Your question is very pointed about what is the timeline for the census. The timeline for self-response was initially slated to end on July the 31st. So under a normal circumstance, that would have ended just this past weekend. As of now, the new deadline for self-response, has been extended, not officially, until October the 31st. Now, Congress would have to approve that change in deadline for October the 31st to be the last day for self-response. The message that we're trying to carry right now is that people need to act now, because until Congress, and if they do not take any actions to extend the deadline, that would mean that self-response would be ending anytime now. Like Melanie mentioned, August the 11th will be the day when the enumerators, which are our staff that come and knock door to door, August the 11th will be the first day when they'll be out in our communities. But we need to try and reinforce that message that this is the time to respond.
And when will the census efforts end?
The census effort would end when Congress determines what the final date will
Okay.
be. That will happen.
So
Up
it's
until
yet
now,
undetermined.
October 31st seems to be the final date for that
Okay.
count. We will not know until Congress makes the final decision.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions from the council?
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you both. Any other reports? Next, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. All of these items were gone over in length this past Thursday. They're always available at least the next day on YouTube. Mr. Corley? Well, first I'll take a motion, and second, Mr. Corley, if you can handle the legal aspects.
Yes, sir. Item 7 is the payment of bills. Item number 8 is resolution number 628820, which approves an alcohol license for Inverness Corners NBR Norcross LLC, doing business as Wingstop Inverness. Resolution number 628920 is a resolution approving an alcohol license for 5190 Medford Drive, doing business as Jubilee Joe's. Item 10 is a resolution for an alcohol license for Jubilee Joe's located at 5190 Medford Drive for 020 Restaurant Retail Liquor. The resolution 629120 authorizes the use of the Hoover Senior Center for the Hoover Candidates 2020 Forum. Resolution 629020 declares certain personal property as surplus and determines that it's not needed for public or municipal purpose and directs the disposal of such property. Resolution number 629220 authorizes the mayor to execute an amendment to a memorandum of lease agreement with TVT1 LLC in substantially the form attached to the resolution as Exhibit A. Resolution 629320 declares certain personal property is not needed for public or municipal purposes and direct disposal of said surplus property. And then resolution number 629420 authorizes the mayor to fill current employee position vacancies listed in the resolution.
President, I move for approval of all items on the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Anyone see the need to remove any item from the consent agenda? Including the audience. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Now we're going to move on with our regular agenda. And we have Resolution 629520. Mr. Corley.
Resolution 629520 declares Derek Murphy as duly elected to the City Council Place 5 in the city of Hoover for the term commencing on the first Monday in November 2020.
Move for approval of resolution 629520.
Second.
We have any additional seconds? Everybody might want to. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Mr. Murphy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Next, Resolution 62. I'm sorry?
Resolution 629620 approves the certificate of election to Derek Murphy, City Council Place 5 for the term commencing on the first Monday in November 2020.
Move for approval of resolution 629620.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from the council of the audience? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 6297.
Council President Smith. hold on
Yes,
just a
sir.
moment.
Yes, ma'am.
The mayor has something, for the last one for 629620.
6296. Okay. Mr. Murphy, you may be needed at the podium.
They need him, so health officer said you can take this off with speaking, and I'd like to do that. I'd like to present this certificate of election to Councilman Murphy. Come down, we'd like to do that publicly. This is more or less your installation, I would say, a reinstallation. But congratulations on qualifying for City Council Place 5. And tonight we would like to present you with this and take a picture and record this great event for you. So congratulations and welcome aboard.
Of course, Mr. Murphy, you'll be sworn in on the first Monday of November. Say a few words.
I'll be brief. I would like to thank the city of Hoover for allowing me to serve in multiple capacities. I'm very engaged, very involved, and it's been a pleasure to serve, and I hope I continue to serve in an appropriate way. I love the city. I love for us to continue to be a great city and doing all things we need to do to continue to be great. Thank you all so much for the opportunity.
All right. Now, Mr. Corley, Resolution 629720.
This resolution authorizes the installation of fire hydrants by the Birmingham Water Works at the locations listed in the resolution.
Move for approval of Resolution 629720.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Mr. Murphy, do you plan to abstain?
I'll be abstaining from this vote.
Very good. Any
Let
comments?
let me explain one thing, because I think someone asked me a question. So I'm always straight by the book. I work with a water company, so therefore I'm abstaining because of that.
Any comments or questions from the council? Any from the audience? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 6298-20. Mr. Corley.
This resolution appoints the 2020 election officers for the municipal election and runoff if necessary, and sets the compensation therefore.
Move to approve Resolution 629820.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I believe the clerk has handed all of us names of all the individuals working at the 14 various polling sites, including the absentee ballot section. Ms. Dickerson, do you have anything to add?
No, we do have some alternates, so in the
Okay.
resolution, we have it in place where if we need alternates due to unforeseen circumstances, we can put those in.
Very good. Comments or questions from the council? Any from the audience? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 6299-20, Mr. Corley.
This resolution authorizes the mayor to enter into an agreement with Raymond James and Associates, Inc. related to the restructuring of certain city debt and the engagement of bond counsel related thereto.
Move to approve Resolution 629920.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Powell? I don't know that you need to go in as much detail as you did at the work session, but since Mr. Adams wasn't here, he may find a few extra questions asked of him.
Yes, sir. This resolution is proposing that the city refinance certain portions of its debt that is currently outstanding for the purpose of saving some money. The proposal I have recommended is to refinance approximately $18 million of our debt. And in so doing, under using the different scenarios that have been presented to us by Mr. Matt Adams of Raymond James, I'd like to propose that the city council adopt scenario 1, which has been presented during the work session. Scenario 1 would authorize the issuance of public warrants to refinance the $18 million worth of debt, and the city should net save approximately $180,000 from doing so. I know we had lots of discussion Thursday at work session about other scenarios. We had questions that were posed. In particular, Mr. Murphy had some specific questions, and I'm prepared to address those. I would like to introduce Matt Adams from Raymond James. He's worked with us quite a bit over the last couple of months as we have explored the different possibilities, and he's done a lot of calculations for us to help us along the way. But quick background, when the virus hit and we were faced with the possibility of having strained financial resources in the future, one of the options that came up and was discussed was refinancing to be able to save money and to be able to smooth out some of our debt service payments over a more extended period of time. And so from there, we have gone down several options. We've considered several different scenarios and met with the investment committee on June 29th. And we covered some of those scenarios. And in following the suggestions of the investment committee, I'm bringing this to the entire city council tonight, and I'm ready to answer any questions you might have about this. Would like to introduce Matt Adams first and foremost, and he is prepared to answer any questions as well.
Any comments or questions from the council?
Mr. President, if I may. I want to begin by thanking the investment committee once again, Mr. Posey, Mr. Smith, Mayor Bricado, and Mr. Rice for all the hard work I know that you guys have put into reviewing what Mr. Powell's put together. Mr. Powell, I know I mentioned this last Thursday, but I again want to mention how much I appreciate the thorough review and detail you put in coming to this recommendation for option one. Mr. Adams, Ray J has been a tremendous partner to the city of Hoover for many, many years, if not decades. And certainly you're carrying that on as well, and we really do appreciate all you've done, the number crunching, and the level of detail you provided to us to be able to make this decision. I know we discussed this 2 or 3 times at various meetings of the investment committee. We discussed it here, of course, Thursday night. Mayor Bricado, I would also invite you, if you wouldn't mind, to come up and say a word or two, because I know you've been very involved, not only in this matter, but all investment and financial matters. I think the mayor said it publicly on a number of occasions that no stone should be unturned in finding the best path forward fiscally for the city. And certainly when this idea came to the table, he was very open to it. I appreciate, Mayor, your engagement in it. And if you wouldn't mind just saying a word or two about your thoughts on this.
Sure, thank you. So this is not something that we rushed into by any means. We've all taken a really hard look at it, and we think that this is a good business decision on our part to take this opportunity to take advantage of the low interest rates in particular. And there's a significant savings that we will realize quickly. And it really doesn't take away, it gives us more options. We can continue, and we will budget to pay this off in the next 2 years. But we do have the opportunity, if the economy got to such a place that we were having to make really, really difficult financial decisions, it would give us some flexibility. And I think that's something that we ought to take advantage of. And we haven't all talked about it, but our finance committee has certainly talked about it. And I believe that we would be viewed as making a sound financial decision, taking advantage of the interest rates that are available right now.
If I could just add to that, Mr. President, what the mayor said is spot on. This just gives us greater flexibility in managing the finances going forward. It doesn't kick any can down the road. It allows us the opportunity, if cash flows go further south than we may anticipate, it gives us an option, flexibility in how to pay that back. And then the cherry on top is the fact that, as Mr. Powell said, it saves us $180,000 no matter how you cut it. So every Hoover family, every Hoover business is looking for ways to save money and to give them greater flexibility in how they service their debt. And this is how the city of Hoover is doing it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be heard and for this to be considered. Thank you.
Mr. Adams, please come down. First question I have is, if the city goes ahead and pays this off early, are there any prepayment penalties?
So the current language in the 2010s, there's a 30-day period that you have to provide notice to bondholders. And so really the only penalty is just the interest that you already would be paying during that 30-day period. But they're callable at par. So there's no, like a 1% premium or anything like that. You just have to provide notice for 30 days before you can call them.
That would be in 2021 or 2022, correct?
Yes, sir. That would be currently until they're paid off.
Okay. What is the interest rate?
On the 2010s,
No, sir, on this document, if it passes.
so currently on scenario 1, we have a current interest rate of it's just under 2%
Okay.
on this 2010 refunding.
Okay. It's my understanding that if the city were to pay these off before the end of August in cash, what would be the realized savings?
So I want to be clear about something on scenario one. Really,
No, this isn't any of the scenarios. This is if the 2010 bonds are paid off in cash,
oh, I'm sorry.
what would be the realized savings?
Yeah, so if you were to pay the 2010s off in cash, the present value savings would be about 795,000. It would cost you around 17.7 to 18 million to do that.
Right.
So you have to come up with,
Okay, 795,000. Where in the renewing of these funds and where does that 795,000 go?
well,
If you're paying off an old loan with a new loan, you should have the same realized savings no matter what.
so the difference between paying off and refinancing, with refinancing, you essentially still have interest that you're paying. And what we've done is we've structured the refinancing so that you've got cash flow relief over the next 2 years in 21 and 22. And then in 23 and 24, your debt service payments are a little bit higher because the city's debt service drops off. So you still have interest. It's just about $180,000 lower.
So
With
we pay, if we renew it, it's gonna cost us $600,000 in additional interest by renewing it.
No, sir.
I'm-
So your debt
I'm in the
service,
finance business, so I'm kind of curious.
your debt service drops by $180,000. That's the bottom line. If you are to refinance the debt, your debt service would drop by $180,000 after you reshuffle the deck to provide about 8.5 million of cash flow relief in 21 and 22. If you pay off the debt, you are not paying interest on those bonds anymore. And so the 700,000, 795,000 from paying off is because you're not paying interest. You're basically taking cash from the city and you're using that to pay off debt early. And so you're not paying any interest on it. So I think the difference between the two scenarios are scenario one would be there's no upfront cost for the city and you wind up just saving $180,000. With a payoff, you're using 17.5 to 18 million in cash to get,
So the difference is
$795,000.
going towards the payment of future interest.
I'm sorry.
The $700,000 difference is going towards the payment of future insurance then,
So
or future interest.
the two are kind of comparing apples and oranges. With a refinance, your overall debt payments drop by $180,000. With a payoff, you're spending, 17 plus million to $18 million today to essentially receive $795,000 over the next 2 years.
I know I can be a little thick-skulled sometimes, but help me to understand, and anybody else that can jump in that may understand where I don't. You're talking about paying interest on monies that were paid off? Because with the new issuance and the new bonds, aren't the old bonds paid off?
They are, but you're still paying interest on the new debt. So you would replace 2010 debt with 2020 debt.
Okay, well, that's what I'd asked a moment ago, was that money going towards the payment of future interest.
Yeah, so your debt
Okay.
service drops by 180,000 in one scenario, and in another scenario, it drops by 795,000. In scenario one, you
Okay.
spend nothing to get the $180,000. In the payoff, you spend 17.7 million or so to get.
I think I better understand now. What is the interest rate that the city is earning on our invested funds right now?
So the invested funds, the cash is less than 0.5%. It sits in a Fidelity, investment account. CDs and treasuries are north of that. You know, some of them are over 1%. So, depends on what investment
Okay.
class it's in, but those are kind of the three various ones that you guys have.
Very good. But if the council were to choose to find monies that are currently placed in other funds, the city would save 795,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
thanks.
Any other
President, if I could
questions?
just-
Yes.
I just mention, I think the investment crew has really done a good job with this, and the more I've looked at it, I think it's worthwhile to invest or investigate paying off. I mean, obviously, if you can get rid of debt, that's a good thing. The problem is we're in a time of extreme uncertainty, and in a time of extreme uncertainty, we need options. And this is a very intelligent solution that gives us plenty of options. If things go really bad the next couple of years with the economy, cash is king. This gives us options to pay off debt if we need to, if we can, but it also gives us a lot of reserve cash. So like I said in the work session, I was very skeptical about this at the beginning, but the more I've looked at it, I think it's a really intelligent option that's going to give future councils a lot of options to adjust to any issues that may come about, whether things go well or things go poorly. I think it sets us up well for both scenarios.
Mr. President,
Mr. Posey.
here's what, Mike, I hear what you're saying, but here's what bothers me. We're very close to having a projection for next year. Is that correct? 2 days out from having a revenue projection for next year, which will give us, you know, an idea of where we're going. I mean, you did a great job. I'm not saying that this is not a good thing. I'm just saying that we're gonna save $180,000 total to back this up 2 years, when we're 2 days from having a revenue projection for next year. Which means that we'll look at it and go, all right, well, that $9 million worth of debt service is palatable. And then we start working toward doing it the next year, and then the debt's gone. It's over with. We paid it off. Or we can save $180,000 to put this in basically an escrow account to pay it off 2 years down the road. I think I'd like to have a projection of where we're going before we make this decision. And I know that's 2 days away. I don't know if you have something tonight you can give us, or, you know.
Yes.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, to Mr. Posey's point, we do have a conversation tomorrow that will get us much closer. I can't promise you that we'll solve it tomorrow afternoon. And just in full disclosure, there are a lot of revenue lines, and we're trying to go back and dig deep on each one of those. So it's soon. I can't tell you it'll be by the end of this week. And just to reiterate one point from Thursday night, we really see the value in the budgeting process of going ahead, as Mr. Lyda mentioned, budgeting for this, just as if we did not refi, making those payments on schedule, just as if we did not refi, but having that emergency relief valve so that, as Mr. Stahl mentioned, we're in extremely uncertain times. We have a national election. Who knows what the next destabilizing event is in the economy? We would have that relief valve, and it would cost us nothing and net us $187,000 to give us that option. If that helps from a budgeting perspective, that's kind of the way we're looking at it. We're not presupposing that we're pushing it off 2 years. We're giving ourselves that option. I believe that the mayor's instruction to us is to bring a budget that includes that debt service, whether it's refied or not. But we have that escape hatch. If something bad happens, then we can work with those debt payments. I hope that's helpful.
It does. I'm just thinking, you know, I like to have every number I can have possible in front of me and making the decision. And when you said last week you were close to having that number, then of course I want that number. It's just the way I am, you know.
President, the great thing about this option is whatever the scenario is, if there's an option for any of those. Whatever the projection is, if it's true or not, this has the option to adjust accordingly.
Mr. Murphy, did you have any questions?
Yes, so, just a couple of things. Ben, were you able to get me a scenario option, and also in the event that it's paid off early, what those funds will come from, what pools of money? And is, as I heard correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, between the two, the cost difference of saving is roughly like 615,000. That, they're using the math that you gave on option one and option two. The gentleman that just finished talking. Was the,
I'm sorry, say your
was
question
the
one more time.
cost savings between the two, 615, about $600,000?
So again, the savings are, that would be the correct number, the difference.
Right, right. So the only thing we're combating with is whether or not we have the money up front, right, to give up at this time versus do we want to safeguard against what happens in the future? So-
One other thing I would mention for your consideration is just the city's rating currently is AAA by S&P and AA1 by Moody's. And that's one of the higher ratings in the state. And it is supported by your heavy reserve levels. And so to the extent that you pay for some of that out of reserve levels, as opposed to capital projects or something else, then it could cause some problems from a rating standpoint.
Do we have some projection of what that would, what, if our reserves go down to X number, it will definitely impact it? Do we know exactly the number, what that should be?
I think if you have a reserve of 32 million at the end of last year, 37 million projected for the end of this year, and you spend 17 to 18 million of that, then you're probably going to get downgraded. That's a significant enough move.
We're not expected to have 37 million at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay, I'm sorry
We're
then.
expected to have 32 and a half.
Okay, so if you've got 32 and a half and you spend 17, then it's going to have a rating impact.
Is it, I get the theoretical notion, but any way possible we get like a definite, do we know like definite what our reserve will have to be with our current expenditures monthly, what that will look like? That's give or take. If we had a $60 million expenditure piece and we had $20 million, the difference between having 200,000, right, expenditure and having 5 in the reserve, right? So how do you know a definite? I'm trying to make an informed decision.
No, it's a really good question.
Uh-huh.
And what we can do is if I don't have it with me, but we can send you the benchmark of the median for all cities rated in the AAA rating category.
Yeah, that'll be great.
And then you can have what that is. Now, I will say that in the past, the cities represented to Moody's and S&P that it would keep at least 3 months in the reserve of operating expenses.
Okay.
That's kind of an informal policy. I'm not aware of you guys adopting anything formally on that. That's just been
Gotcha.
something that we passed on in rating discussions on prior bond issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So that would be somewhere in the area of $30 million.
Yes,
Correct.
and I would add to that, I did perform a little bit of research on that matter of what the appropriate percentage of reserves is, and found the Government Finance Officers Association has a best practice they recommend. It's actually 2 months of operating expenditures or operating revenues, whichever is most stable.
Gotcha.
And that's in a stable environment. They say if you have a volatile environment, you should possibly plan for more than that, but 2 months.
So
is
for
what we
us,
should
is
have.
that like 20, what? How many million? 22? What
So
is it?
on a
For City Hoover?
125 million budget, it's going to be in the neighborhood of 30.
30 million? So our monthly expenditures, what again now?
Monthly expenditures are about 10 million per month.
So 2 will be 20 million, right?
Yeah, 20 just depending on whether you want to go with the volatile situation
Okay, I
or
understand
not.
that.
Yeah.
So 20 to 30 million dollars.
That's right.
Best case scenario, 30.
That's right.
Industry standard is 20.
The best
Gotcha.
practice recommends a minimum, and then you go up from there based
Thank
on your environment. That's right.
Any other questions from the council?
You gotta pass
Yes,
something
Mr.
out?
President.
Mr.
Mr.
Green.
Rice, you had mentioned the information, the financial information that will be provided to us within 2 days. can you think of a scenario where if this does pass tonight, that it could be a problem with the information that we'll be receiving?
Do I think it would present a
Is,
problem?
right, if this passes tonight, the information that we do not have for another 2 days, is there a scenario where you can see if so-and-so happens, that would be a problem if this passed tonight?
No, sir. I think that based on what we anticipate to bring you, we will project decreased revenue for FY '21. So we'll be going in very lean because of the uncertainty, probably hanging our hat on a mid-year reevaluation at the 6-month mark of the fiscal year. So this, I don't see a scenario where this would be a detriment at all. It would save us a little bit of money. And again, I go back to that thought process about a little relief valve, so that if the waves start coming in FY '21, we see continuously diminishing revenues. We have another event outside of COVID-19, outside of some of the things we're already dealing with. Then we have the ability to say, okay, we were making payments that we didn't have to make. Now we're going to either cut those back, we're going to spend them for a little while, we're going to put the cash over here. But to answer your question, no, I don't see a detriment to this whatsoever. It would only be a benefit from a budget management standpoint. It doesn't cost us anything. It pays us money to do.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Adams, in addressing Mr. Green's question, if the resolution passed tonight, but it had a 72-hour delay, so the council could receive those figures, to where if we felt that we needed to reverse course, we could call a called meeting and stop it. Is that going to cost any money, waiting 72 hours for implementation?
No, sir. If you guys, look, we've worked with the city of Hoover for long enough. If you guys call me up and tell me, hey, we've got some revised projections and we think we're going to be fine without doing this, we don't need it, you know, no skin off my back. We've got a long enough relationship that I'm fine.
Very
fine-
good.
fine on that.
Before Ben gives his closing statements, seeing that the rate is under 2% makes this opportunity a fair bit more palatable to me. The one thing that I do want to go on record as saying is that if we pay those off with monies that are yielding less than 0.5%, we're saving almost 3.5% of what we're paying on the bonds. We've eliminated $9 million worth of debt for both fiscals 21 and 22, and we don't have the escalated debt of $13.3 million starting in 23 and running for 3 years. One thing that we talked about Thursday was my concern of 23 coming along and finding that the city still can't afford a $13 million payment.
Well, you know, in response to that, I would just kind of echo Mr. Rice's comments that if you wanted to, and this is not a long drawn out situation from a revenue standpoint, you can certainly budget for the payment and pay these off on schedule, on course.
Well, I'm saying if revenues say bad in 21, 22, and you can't make those payments that you wish you could have made, and it's still bad in 23, and you can't afford a $13+ million payment, you're going to have to take it from other sources of city funds, whether it be administrative, public safety, or whatever. The debt's got to be paid. There are no ways around it.
Yep. And if that's a concern, I would also, you know, just think about it from the other standpoint too, that if we're delaying capital projects to pay for the payoff of the 2010s, and that situation does occur, we have no margin of safety, and we've delayed a lot of capital projects until beyond 23, if that makes sense. So if it does last that long, I think either scenario has its flaws and problems.
Mr.
President, if
you
I could
pay
ask
it
one
off or.
question about that.
Mr. Shaw.
We end up in a situation where things, the worst case scenario, and we have $13 million in debt payments, and we're having trouble making ends meet. About how many options do we have to adjust that debt in a way that we can handle? I mean, is it over 1,000?
It's, it's not over 1,000, but you've got several things that you can do, depending on whether or not your reserves are still intact. So there's always the opportunity in 23, if things are still bad, you can draw on reserves possibly at that point in time, assuming you haven't spent them down, today. Or you have other pieces of debt that are outstanding that you could possibly look at refinancing at that point, if rates stay low.
And that's not exactly what I was saying earlier. As long as as long as the cash is, we have the cash is king, we have a lot of options we can do to handle that scenario. If we have, under this option, we keep everything open, to be able to handle anything that comes around.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Dr. Middlebrooks.
Mr. Adams, you mentioned, if we go through with scenario one and refinance, we could still make the, 8.5 million planned payments as we have now and pay it off early. If we went that route, what then would be the, savings that we would see through the early payoff and the refinance?
Yeah, hold on one second, let me grab it. So if you did that and you paid off, you paid this off in, say, 22 on the original schedule, you're looking at lowering the interest by 1.2 million or so.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You're looking at lowering the interest on this by about 1.2 million.
1.2.
Yes, sir.
So if we refinance and continue to make payments as scheduled, you're saying we'd see a $1.2 million savings?
If you paid off the debt in 23, so let's assume that you budgeted to pay your normal payments in 21, your normal payments in 22, and then at the end of 22, the outlook was rosy and bright, and you decided to use that money that you had accumulated over 21 and 22 to pay, just completely pay off the 2010s at that point, then yes, that would be roughly what your additional savings from doing that would be.
Help. And that's on top of the 180,000 that we would
Yes, sir.
also save.
Yes, sir.
So help me understand why, if we paid them off early and now, without refinancing, we're looking at roughly $800,000 in savings. But if we refinance and continue to make the payments, we're looking at 1.2 million in savings.
Yes, sir.
Plus, well, 1.4 almost.
Yep. So the difference is, your debt service on the 2010s, was issued at a higher interest rate, and currently you're refinancing somewhere south of 2%. And so you wind up saving money from that. If we were just do a refinancing of the 2010s for 2 years and not extend the maturity, you would wind up saving money under that scenario. And so that accounts for some of the difference between just paying off versus a scenario one type refinancing.
Mr. President.
Well, my follow-up question will be for the mayor then. Mayor, what is your intentions if we do not see such a decrease in revenue projections and so forth? If we refinance now, and it's not in the hole, can you commit that you maintain the current payments as is?
Yes, sir. We're going to budget as if we have not refinanced.
Well, he's got to propose it though.
We're gonna, what are we doing? Yeah, that certainly is up to the council, but we will send you a budget with those payments in there, regardless if we refi or not. Our goal is to pay it off on schedule, just as it is now. We're just trying to protect our cash flow if we had some unforeseen downturn in the economy. It doesn't take, it gives us more options. We don't lose any options by doing this. We increase our options because there's no penalty for if you know in a year from now, if things were really rosy, you say, you know what, we want to go ahead and pay off early, pay that last year off early. There would be no penalty. Am I correct for that? For early payment.
Yeah,
So we don't lose any. We pick up options, and we pick up cash, hard cash this year, 180,000. And then I think I heard you say, if we continue to make our payments through the next 2 years, that we would realize an additional 1-point-something million in savings. So there's a great deal of benefit. Gives us a lot of options, puts a lot of extra money in our bank account. Did that answer you, Dr. Middlebrook?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Anything else from the council? Anything from the audience?
Mr. President. Just-
Mr.
I'm
Fine.
sorry, just clarification for the council. We have that meeting on Wednesday, but we are not, the revenues is about a 6-page spreadsheet. And we're working through it line by line. So I just want to be clear, there is no guarantee that we will have final revenue projections for you within the next 2 days. We're working hard on it, but I don't want you guys to leave here tonight thinking that that's ironclad. It all depends on what we find when we get in there Wednesday afternoon.
Well, I believe it'll be up to the body to determine whether or not there's any delay in implementation.
Absolutely. Just want to be clear about that part.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, please come down. Give us your name and address, even though we already know who you are. Or your name, your street name, and your zip code.
My name is Ron Brown. I live 4413 Ryan Village Drive. It's going to be Hoover, Alabama, 35216.
Going to be?
Pardon me?
Going to be?
Pardon me?
Going to be?
Well, that's my address right now.
Okay.
My name is Ron Brown. In listening, I'm hearing everything, and so I do have a little background in finance. And so I'm hearing we have the 180 aspect. If we go ahead and we got the 180 aspect, correct? And then we have the aspect of $700,000. So something that I'm seeing right here, can we split the baby? That's a legal term in which we use in my field. Is that instead of us paying off $18,000, can we just pay off 18 million? Can we pay off 9 million? And then we reap a benefit of $300,000 and some odd thousand. That way everybody wins. Does that make sense? So that way we don't exhaust all of our cash flow for the city, and we're still sitting kind of pretty. But then we also be able to pay off some of those things. It'll give us an influx of cash. Does that make sense to everybody?
I guess,
Let me
Mr.
walk it back.
Adams,
Let me walk it back. So
Mr. Adams would need to identify, I know if I make a house payment and I make an extra payment, they still expect a house payment next month. So the question is, if the city paid off 9 million in 2021, or
that's what we're doing.
no,
Instead of paying
yeah,
off the
yeah.
lump 18
Well, if you
million.
pay off the 9 million in 2021, instead of just the 4.8 million, then you're only going to be putting 4.2 million towards that principal.
And as we do the numbers, like you said, the 18 million, it makes sense. I understand we have someone, I know someone said we're not going to kick it down the road, but actually we are kind of kicking it down the road to a perspective. But I'm thinking mindset from a math perspective, if I do have a $18 million home and I go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to the closing table, I'm gonna give you 9 million, then we're only doing the debt on the other 9 million. Does that make sense to everybody? Instead of doing the full debt on the other 18 million.
Mr. President, I think the answer to your question is yes, you can do with this
Yes.
with this option.
Right.
If things look all right, it's kind of what Dr. Middlebrooks was talking about. This leaves us that option. If things are looking good, we can split the difference. It leaves all those options on the table. Option one does.
Okay, so that makes sense. So that's what I was looking, just hearing both parties, both sides going back and forth with it. I just looked at it from a standpoint of, hey, if we could do half now and go move forward, and you're saying that's not an option for us, or you're leaving it where it can be a potential option with the 180, and then if we decide to down the road without doing a full commitment, then we can go forth and do that. That's how you're looking at it that way.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Anyone else? All right. Ms. Powell, if you please close things up for us.
Yes, sir. I think I started Thursday's work session by saying that, in this, current time, it was gonna take, we were gonna have to work hard for our money. And this is part of that. We are having to work hard to make the little bit of money that we're talking about here, whether it's 180,000 or 800,000 in round numbers. We're having some tough decisions, and I appreciate you indulging me in the conversation. I did prepare a document that I distributed to you as others were talking, and those are my attempt to provide answers to Mr. Murphy's questions that he asked Thursday, and I can run through that real quickly. The exhibits there too, if you'll start with the Exhibit A, the graph, I think Mr. Murphy asked for a graphic depiction that would include the paying off the debt entirely early. And so you'll see that purple line added to what was there Thursday evening to show a graphic representation of the debt service expenditures there. The question was asked about how much do we have in reserves. So Exhibit B, at the bottom left corner of Exhibit B, you'll see a number that shows the total fund balance, and you'll recognize that number, 32,700,000. Of that 32,700,000, $30,995, $30,995,000 and a few dollars is what's unassigned and unrestricted that are available for any purpose. So I wanted to make sure that you saw that that's as of September 30 from our comprehensive annual financial, our audited financial report. Exhibit C, the next question that I had on my list, actually, we've already talked about, was the cash reserves and is there a standard? So I've provided a link to the GFOA best practice that I mentioned. And then Exhibit C, I also want to point out the bottom left corner of the page, Exhibit C. This page is showing our interim financial statements as of June 30th. And you'll notice, and I think, Mr. Smith, you commented about the 37 million. So by reducing our budgeted expenditures earlier this year, back a few months ago, the net result of that is an increase in our fund balance, projected fund balance, by $4.4 million. So if we can achieve that, that's meaningful in that the next question was asked, what are the sources of funds that could be utilized to pay off the entire debt early? And so you have the 30,995,000 number that I mentioned in your cash reserves. You could potentially have 4.4 million in surplus that will be available at the end of this year. And then I want to move on to Exhibit D, which is Capital Projects Fund summary. And you'll see that this is a list of our capital projects that you also received with your June 30 interim financial statements. And I've divided those into 5 categories. The 2 pertinent categories are B and C. B are projects that have not started. You have almost $5 million in projects budgeted that have not begun yet. In Group C, you have projects that have started, but right now there are no current encumbrances, no purchase orders open on those projects right now in the Capital Projects Fund. So that's another 1.57 million. So you have the potential of $5 to $6.5 million in capital projects that you could use to allocate towards paying off the debt. So if you think about the 4.4 million and the say up to 6.5 million here, you're looking at around $11 million in surplus from operating and capital projects that you would need to defund and reallocate the funds for the purpose of paying off the debt. So $11 million, you're still about $7 million short. You would have to dip into our actual cash reserves by about $7 million in a best case scenario to be able to pay off that debt early. So I just am trying to answer that question for you, Mr. Murphy. I hope that
Thank you.
helps.
I appreciate
Ms.
it.
Powell,
Great
if
job.
I could, while you're on Exhibit D, how much of these same numbers are needed to balance the current fiscal year? Or is this looking beyond that?
No, this is just the current fiscal year. This, eh,
We found, I think it was 6.3 million, Mr. Rice, in the operating budget that you've already found, and so we're gonna have another 4 to 5 million minimum that will need to come out of, capital.
Our operating cuts, I think, are approximately 8 million.
How
Late-
much? I'm sorry,
About
8?
approximately
Okay.
8, but laid against about a $2.7 million deficit at this point.
Okay, so let's say round it to 3 million that will have to come off these numbers before you could even talk about any additional reserve.
That's right. If I can go back to Exhibit C, I do want to point out that 4.4 is the budget number. In your,
Okay.
in your year-to-date projected and your year-to-date actual, you'll see we actually have in year-to-date actual, a $17.8 million surplus right now. But over the next 3 months, those are months that are traditionally heavier on expenditures and lighter on revenues. So we're always spending more in July, August, and September. We have large debt service payments. We have part of our obligation due to the school boards. We have 3 pay periods in a month where there's normally 2. Things like that contribute to us burning more money in those 3 months.
Very good,
So-
thank you.
Okay.
Anything else?
Any other questions? Otherwise, I will be on standby if you do come up with something. Appreciate your consideration of this.
Anything else from the council? We've got a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Lyda?
Aye.
Dr. Middlebrooks?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. The resolution passes unanimously. Next, we have ordinance 20-2486, Mr. Corley.
This ordinance levies the municipal taxes for the city of Hoover beginning on and after the first day of October, 2020.
Move to approve
Second
or
reading.
adopt ordinance 20-2486.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Is Ms. Bolt available? Is she in the waiting room? Oh, you're going to speak? Okay. If you just quickly explain what taxes we are voting on. You're good. You have somebody here.
You gotta come up.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the annual levy for the Avalon property taxes. That's levied on residences or real estate, actually all property, real or personal, and franchises at a rate of 6.5 mils for the city and 24 mils for the school board. It's the annual levy that we raise our property taxes with every year. Also allows for the counties, Jefferson and Shelby County, to act as our assessor and collector of those taxes.
And there is no increase in the tax rate.
No, sir, that is correct.
All right.
Same rate we've had for many years, back to 98.
Any questions from the council? Any from the audience? We do have a motion and a second, correct? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Lyda?
Aye.
Dr. Middlebrooks?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 20-2487, Mr. Corley.
This ordinance amends the Hoover Municipal Code to change the locations of certain public meetings of various city bodies as set forth in the ordinance effective on September 1st, 2020.
Move to adopt ordinance 20-2487.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. What this ordinance does is, our first meeting back in the new council chambers, will occur the first meeting in September, as well as the work session prior to that date. Now, that's on a Tuesday, correct? Or is that the next week?
Yeah, Tuesday,
Right.
it will be September the 8th is the meeting, and September the 3rd will be the work session.
Very good. So at that time, we will be reconvening in the remodeled council chambers. And I'm sure we will all be glad to get home. Any comments or questions from the council? Any from the audience? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Lyda?
Aye.
Dr. Middlebrooks?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. Next, we have an ordinance that had some housekeeping needed to occur. Ordinance 20-2490, Mr. Corley.
This ordinance amends the number of ordinance number 20-2484 to ordinance number 2490. No other changes were made to the ordinance as previously adopted, and to amend it tonight would require unanimous consent and a roll call vote.
President, I move for adoption of ordinance 20-2490.
Second.
Okay, first we're gonna need to have a motion to suspend the rules. Ms. Dickerson, is there anything that you need to put into the record?
No, sir.
Very good. All right, first we need a motion to suspend the rules.
Move to suspend for immediate consideration.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Lyda?
Aye.
Dr. Middlebrooks?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. We have now moved to suspend the rules. Chair will take a motion for consideration of ordinance 20-2490.
Move to adopt ordinance 20-2490.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Comments or questions from the council, from the audience? Seeing here none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Lyda?
Aye.
Dr. Middlebrooks?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next, we have first readings and setting of public hearings for August 20th of this month. No action will be taken tonight. Mr. Corley?
Ordinance number 20-2488 amends the Hoover zoning ordinance to rezone property located at 1331 Alford Avenue from Hoover R1 to Hoover R4 with the condition that is for the sole purpose of being used for a new Montessori school and that there will be no multifamily residential use for the property.
Resolution 628720.
This resolution approves a conditional use for property located at 1331 Alford Avenue for the sole purpose of being used for a new Montessori school, subject to the conditions noted.
Ordinance 20-2489.
This ordinance amends the Hoover zoning ordinance to amend the rear and side setbacks with the legacy single-family residential district.
Very good. That concludes all of our action items. We're getting ready to go to public comment. I would like to say, as the last meeting, that at any point, should anyone start yelling or swearing, then if you're present, you will be asked to leave. If you're online, you will be terminated. So that being said, I was contacted by Mr. James Smith to be able to speak this evening. And Twister, if you lead him up to the podium.
Mr. President, will we also have the time limit?
Oh, what time limit would the body like to set?
3 minutes.
Okay, show me where people are now.
Mr. President, what about the presentation for the Montessori
Council
school?
to the right.
Is it first
Was there,
Yeah, the first reading of that, are we gonna do the presentation for it first?
Is there someone here for that?
They're walking out
I'm
the door,
sorry.
sir.
Are y'all here for the presentation for the Montessori school? Why don't you come on down, Mr. Smith? Twister, lead him back to his seat for just a moment. We need to wait just a few minutes. We have a presentation to hear. Come on down, sir. Do you have that available for the projections? No? Okay. That's fine. I was just asking, Mr. Cope.
Yeah. White.
Do this where I can talk. Thank you, Mac. And how this was built, I couldn't even begin to tell you, but when we started looking at remodeling the school, we discovered that the field lines actually come out across into, it's on a septic system, the field lines come across into the existing single-family houses lot. This property is currently zoned R4 with a conditional use for a daycare, which is, that's the only way you can have a daycare in the city of Hoover, the way the zoning ordinances are written. So, the McDougalls are here, they've purchased this and are wanting to remodel it, but also expand their daycare. And also the existing playground encroaches out into the single-family lot, and it's been that way for years, it looks like. I mean, it's an old rundown playground that really is not being used right now. So what we're asking for is to resurvey the lot into one large lot and make the whole property R4 with a conditional use for a Montessori school. So I'll be glad to answer any questions y'all might have. The only other thing I would say is they met with the neighborhood and we were approved unanimously by the planning commission.
President, I have one quick question.
Shaw.
Yes,
Just
sir.
to confirm, the resident there has vacated
Yes,
at this point.
yes. There was a rent, this is a rental property, and there's some confusion about whether he could stay there, and if we rezone it to conditional use, it's no longer eligible to be used as rental property. So it would have to be used for daycare only. That would be the only use this property could be used for. So that's kind of where we would like, that's what we're asking for.
Mr. President, just one question also. Really, just to confirm, this Montessori school, this going to be used as a preschool, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No grades 1 through 5.
Ms. McDougal probably can answer the specifics if you have specific questions about it. But it does go, it's a little bit more than a regular daycare, but it goes through 5 years old, yes.
Any other questions from the council? Mr. Mack, do you have anything you need to add? Very good. Not tonight. Okay. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank y'all.
We will see you again. Any questions that come up at the second reading, you won't have to make any additional presentation unless something has changed. Right. I'm just saying that you won't have to present again unless there's some material changes. Thank you, sir. All right. Now we're going to go back to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, the body has chosen a 3-minute time limit. I know that's less than you had hoped.
I cannot finish my presentation in 3 minutes, President.
It's up to the body whether or not they'll grant you any additional time.
I will start. If you want to interrupt me, that's fine. Mayor Cato and council, this is my third presentation to you regarding the Hoover Express, a valuable service for the visually impaired and the elderly in Hoover. When we transition out of COVID-19 with a vaccine by the end of the year, the service will be reinstated. You may remember that last year when I spoke with you, I informed you that I began attending Mass at Prince of Peace Catholic Parish in Hoover, June through November, until Dana Henson called and said, we will no longer transport you because it's too early, even though they were transporting other passengers to other places earlier than mine. Mayor Cato concurred with her. It is significant to note that Mayor Cato, pre-COVID-19, frequented the center for lunch, dinner at night, dances, friends with Miss Dana. Let me say to you that I am a native Nashvilleian, born with an autosomal recessive hereditary condition called gyrate atrophy. Corrected to 2020 until the age of 23, 4 procedures of surgery, vitreoretinal, 1 gene therapy yet to go. And I relocated from Chicago to Homewood to Hoover, August 2010. 2011, Mayor Tony Patelis introduced me to Tracy Van Zant, manager of Hoover Express, and she set me up. 2012, in her absence, while she was on vacation, Dana Stewart, now Henson, called and said, if you call at 4 o'clock in the morning, we can't let you do that to book your transportation on the designated days. The next week, when Tracy returned from vacation, I called, told her about the conversation with Dana. She said, James, I don't care what time you call on the designated day, as long as it's up until 10 a.m. She was promoted to event coordinator here at the center. Kimberly Smith Wedgeworth was her successor, no relation. And when Kimberly was on vacation in November of last year is when Dana called and not only cut off my service to Prince of Peace, but she said, if you call again before the designated time, if you call at 4 o'clock, we will discontinue your service. Mayor Cato concurred with her. They are of the belief that because someone is visually impaired, they're mentally impaired, and they can take advantage of us. Dana was playing God, preventing me from worshiping God. But Hoover Express is not the first time that Mayor Cato has denied me and other resident services for transportation with the VJCTA.
Mr. Smith,
Yes, sir.
your time has expired. I would suggest perhaps maybe you be placed on the next work session agenda. That way you will not have time restraints. And that will be, let's see, what's the date of the next meeting, Madam Clerk? In the work session the Thursday before?
It will be August 13th.
I'm sorry?
August 13th.
August 13th, you could come back and speak at the work session and you would not have any time restraints because you will be on the agenda. You will be part of the agenda. That's satisfactory to you.
I will be back on the 13th.
Thank you, sir. If the XO is in the waiting room, I think Mr. Smith would like for you to join him outside. Anyone, well, first, anybody else from the council wish to make a statement?
Yeah, one question,
Yes, sir.
to our attorney, Philip. I received several, emails over the course of months and also, tags and Facebook posts and Messenger, about a particular question. And I want to know if you had any, knowledge or background on this in regarding the case of the shooting in November 22nd, 2018. Do you have any?
Yes, Mr. Murphy, I can give you a brief update. A federal civil lawsuit was filed by the Bradford family this past November. It's pending in federal district court for the Northern District of Alabama and Judge Proctor's court. Right now, we're waiting for the judge to allow a second amended complaint to be filed by the plaintiffs to name the Galleria owner and the manager with the correct name. That extends the time to answer for the other new defendants. The defendants would then have 14 days to answer. So we're still in the early stages of that case, and it's best to limit discussion of that case at this time, except in the court. Again, we can tell you the plaintiff is seeking to amend their complaint, and from there, we'll have 14 days to answer or to respond to that amended complaint. Because we're still in the early stages, we hope to have information within the next month. When we do, we can provide that to you in an executive session or otherwise.
Thank you.
Anything else from the council? Comments, questions? All right. Anyone from the audience? Anyone that cares to be heard from? Mr. Schultz?
Council President Smith, there's a sign-in sheet.
Oh, there is a sign-in sheet?
There
Oh,
is.
then let's retrieve it.
My name is Robin Schultz. I'm on Albemarle Drive in Hoover. On Saturday, this past Saturday, we had the opportunity to bring items to the Met on Hazardous Waste Day. And although the traffic was, there's a lot of people that complained about it, I would like to commend the people that worked it, the Hoover City employees that worked it. It was unbelievably hot there. The conditions were really, really rough, yet they did a top-notch job in getting cars unloaded, getting the people in and out of there. Traffic, again, was rough, but there was reasons for the traffic. And I really would like to commend them. And secondly, I think we need to commend also the fine work of the Hoover PD in what they've been doing for the last few weeks. We have not recognized them publicly, and we need to do that. I hope the council does that. So I hope we can commend both the employees on Saturday, Hoover PD. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right. Not having any particular order, I'm going to start at the top. Ms. Dudley? We have you at Crest something here in Hoover.
Yep.
What's the street name?
Crestway Circle.
Crestway Circle. Thank you.
It's good to be here again. My name is Satora Dudley. Most of you may know me from the Black Lives Matter protest led by Sally 65, my organization/team. As lead organizer, I am most certain you know my face. You might also know me because I'm a citizen of Hoover. I went to Gwen Elementary School, Simmons Middle School, and graduated from Hoover High School in 2018. I have checked out books in the Hoover Public Library. I have played on these playgrounds. I went to school with your children. I have grown up in Hoover, and it is my home. I know there is growing concern that Hoover will become like one of these other major cities, such as Portland or Chicago. As lead organizer, I must agree that is not the goal. However, I'm unsure of the intentions of the council, mayor, and Chief Durzer on this matter. My protesters and I have been nothing but nonviolent, and I have attempted to do only what the other counter-protesters have done and been allowed. Now, as a citizen of Hoover, as someone who considers Hoover their home, it is nothing but heartbreaking to see the Hoover Police Department brutalize its citizens. Cell A65's main fight is against racism that plagues our nation today. Racism is a partisan issue, as some may attempt to make it not. Racism is a human issue. Kurt Posey recently made a Facebook post stating that he was unsure what to tell scared Hoover citizens about the nonviolent protests in our city. Councilman Posey, I'll address you directly. You can tell them that it is our First Amendment right to protest. America is built on revolutions and protest. But, Councilman Posey, I must ask, what will you say to the Hoover citizens that have been brutalized by the Hoover Police Department? Moving on, there's also speculation on whether or not I am willing to meet with the mayor and the council. To end those rumors, I would love to have a meeting with all of you and you, Mayor Picado. I would love to have a meeting about EJ's body cam footage and the demands that we've already listed. And before you disregard what I or Cell 65 has to say, I would like to remind you that we will be voting August 25th. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next, we have, is it Connor Welch? Okay, thank you. And you're on Inverness Cove Way here in Hoover, correct? Thank you.
To the mayor and council, my name is Connor Welch, and as a Hoover resident, I am concerned. In 2018, the city and state, at the hands of Attorney General Marshall, supported the murder of E.J. Bradford, claiming that they cannot release the video of his death nor the officers involved names. In recent months, protests have resumed in the waking of another man of color's murder, George Floyd. Citizens of Hoover have joined forces to raise awareness to the brutal reality that haunts this city and its people, and that is that we have not begun to provide justice for EJ's family. And as a result, we have held strong in many months of protest. I come to you this evening to address the disgraceful acts of violence the Hoover Police Department has unleashed on nonviolent protesters. I am addressing the many instances where the police department has brutalized not only people, but their civic right to organize and protest.
Let's recall, we're not to yell.
I could stand here for hours
Sir,
and talk to the
please do
council
not yell.
about the events that happened over the past 3 months. Rather, tonight, I'm going to address the wrongdoings of the last week alone. Last Monday, Hoover Police Department started ramping up their presence on social media. They vowed to release footage of each protest. I'm waiting to see the footage from Tuesday and Saturday. Why have they not been released? Is it because they have not been edited yet to suit your narrative, or perhaps you do not want to incriminate your department? On the events that occurred Saturday, we, the organizers, were informed that we would not be on public property past sunset. I was unaware that the city of Hoover was on curfew. Towards the end of the protest, attendees stood on top of the city hall sign, just like the Trump and Blue Lives Matter protesters did the week before. All were brutally attacked and arrested. One of the people had a seizure, and the medic on the ground on the other side of the barricade was not attended to her. 3 were pepper sprayed after already being in handcuffs, and multiple officers were on top of individuals. These protesters that were not arrested on this day were instructed by Lieutenant McDuffie that, quote, the protest is over. It was not nightfall yet, and the police department does not determine when one can exercise their right to protest. As a citizen of Hoover, I am publicly requesting a meeting with the mayor and the Hoover Police Chief Dursis. And as a voting citizen, I am pleading with all residents to ensure that the entire council be voted out with the respect to those unopposed, and that Gene Smith would never come close to the mayorship. And lastly, if the city of Hoover is so willing to release footage of a nonviolent citizen protesting, why is the city and state lying about E.J. Bradford's murder on a shopping holiday?
Thank you, sir. Next, we have, is it Samadine Paloy? And I show you at Turtle Creek Drive here in Hoover. I show you living at, wait a minute, yes, Turtle Creek Drive here in Hoover. Thank you. That was just for the record.
Good evening, City Council members. I thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight as a
Mr. Coe,
concerned,
if you could please start the clock.
as a concerned resident of Hoover. Last Tuesday, July 28th, I witnessed an egregious overstep of power by the Hoover Police Department as they arrested over 20 peaceful protesters on the green space in front of the City Hall sign. The protesters were not in any violation of any laws or city ordinances. I did not witness any protester attempt to step into the street to obstruct traffic or attempt to antagonize or endanger any police officer. In my opinion, these arrests were an intimidation tactic to stop further protests against police brutality. It is an extreme waste of city funds and a First Amendment violation. I have tried to call the mayor's office and the Hoover Police Department. Unfortunately, my words have fallen on deaf ears. I ask you, as our elected city officials, to investigate this violation and ensure that Hoover is a safe place for all residents and visitors. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next we have, is it Sharon Wang? And you live on Whitestone Way here in Hoover.
First, I would like to speak about E.J. Bradford. E.J. Bradford was a mother's son. He was an uncle and aunt's nephew. He was a friend. E.J. Bradford was a person that was a part of a community. He was well loved, and not only that, but he was a veteran. He took an oath to put his life on the line to protect a country that did not deserve him, and to protect people, to protect every person, even if they had done injustice against him. I've had the pleasure to meet some of E.J. Bradford's friends, and when they speak of him, they speak with the utmost respect. 2 women came out to the protest in front of Hoover City Hall this past Saturday, and also came to the jail to support every protester who was violently arrested. They were close friends with E.J. Bradford, and they were so thankful that we did not forget his life. I'd like for not only the council, Frank Mercado, and Nicholas Durzis, but also every resident of Hoover to think about the pain that is felt when you lose someone who you love so dearly. I would like for every parent to think about the pain that is felt when you have to lay your child to rest. I demand that Frank Mercado, Nicholas Durzis, and the Hoover City Council meet with the organizers of Cell A65. I demand justice for E.J. Bradford. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot understand how it's written, the first name, but Palais on Edenview Drive. Hello, sir. Please start the clock.
Hi, my name is Brian Pillay. I'm on 233 Edenview Drive. I'm concerned about 2 things. One is the social injustice that has been taking place with respect to the overreach of the police department. I've read on Facebook and on other social media about some of the acts of brutality of the police department on Tuesday. So I attended the protest on Saturday to see for myself whether some of the reports from the police department were actually true. I found all of the protesters to follow guidelines of social distancing, wearing masks, etc. They were all pretty well coordinated without any with lots of provocation from the Trump supporters and the all 5 of them that were on the back. I left and later found out that, well, I wasn't there to protect them or anything, but I just left and later found out that that these protesters were arrested. Again, I think these acts of brutality by the police must be held accountable. The other thing I'm very concerned about is with the situation with E.J. Bradford, with the situation of the Hoover Police Department acts of overreach, it's going to cost me and other taxpayers in Hoover in terms of defending these civil cases and in terms of paying out large sums of money. So there's 2 problems. One is the social injustice and the other is the cost that comes to residents like myself. I think the police departments need to be trained properly. I think resources need to be allocated to where they can talk situations down rather than just act in a violent manner. I would ask the City Council and Mayor Mercado to look into these matters urgently, release the video, have some transparency. We as residents and citizens of Hoover deserve transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we have from the same address, I assume this is Mrs. Play? No? Okay. Mr. Cope, do we still have someone online that wishes to speak? Or are there multiple? Yes. Next, we're going to have Melanie Stiers of Bluff Road in Hoover. Melanie, Mr. Cope is unmuting you. All right, you're ready to go, please, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so thank you for giving me the chance to speak tonight. I would like to follow up about the letter related to equity and inclusion in Hoover that was read at the last council meeting at the request of the council. I was very disappointed to see that there was no discussion of these action items at the last council work session or at today's meeting. Although I understand that some of the other action items may have budgetary impacts, it seems to me that creating an equity and inclusion advisory board of diverse Hoover citizens is an action that can and should be taken immediately. I think there may be a misunderstanding that Hoover Ahead can fill this role. Hoover Ahead is an outstanding grassroots organization that has done and continues to do great work in our community. However, a city board is tasked with an official charge, comprises citizens appointed in an open process, and conducts open meetings in accordance with the law. These are two very different types of organizations with different purposes and structures, and equating them is like equating the PTO with the school board. So I would like to ask that this action item of creating an equity and inclusion advisory board be included as an item for discussion on the agendas for the next council work session and meeting. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. I have no one else on the sign-in sheet. Mr. Cope indicates there's no one else online. With that, we're adjourned.